Hey, ghoul friends, it's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of ooky, spooky, scary stories. Welcome back. Thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time, welcome to the Susto fam. Thank you for listening. I hope you've been enjoying. I'm going to just say it right off the bat. You've already seen the title of this episode, so you may have recognized Panteón de Belen, which is an episode that we've done already. And I talked about kind of like the general idea of the cemetery, but this episode I'm going to use to go a little more in depth about the legends from that cemetery. I had a couple of my ghoul friends write in and let me know about some of the really interesting stories that are there, which I did see in my research previously, but I didn't really, kind of peel back the surface and read into them. So I'm excited to bring you, I guess, multiple stories in this episode to give you a better idea about that one. So if you haven't listened, go ahead and check that one out and then come back and listen to this one, or you really don't have to. You can do this one first, and it's not super plot heavy, if you know what I mean. Really quick updates, as always. Tomorrow, Friday the 14th, if you have not gotten your ticket and if you are in the Austin area, I'm going to be doing a talking board workshop with the Austin Seance. So if you haven't seen that on the socials, that's at Susto Podcast across every platform, now including Threads. I am going to be co-hosting or doing an interview with the Austin Seance at Yarrow and Sage here in Austin, and I'm very excited about it. There was very limited seating, so if you were not able to get a ticket and you are still interested in going, you can email me to sustopodcast@gmail.com and let me know that you want to be on the standby list, and if there's any cancellations, I will let you know. It's on a first come first serve basis. I'm excited for this. This is the very first in-person event that Susto is going to be doing. As you know, you can get your VIP attendee and regular attendee tickets for 15% off using code SUSTO at truecrimepodcastfestival.com for the True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival. I'm very excited. That's going to be a multi-day event. Check out the website for all the details. I'm going to be tabling there, and I'm also going to be doing a live session with the Paranormal Putas. So go ahead and check them out. They're also Austin-based, and I'm really excited for our workshop. It's going to be fun. As always, if you want to share your scary story in a Letters from the Beyond episode or on any of the social media platforms, you can send that to me, whether it's written, a photo, or recording, what have you. You can email it to me, again, sustopodcast@gmail.com, DM it to any of the socials, that's at sustopodcast, or leave it in a 5-star review if you are able to do that wherever you're listening. Press all those buttons wherever you're listening, like, follow, subscribe, rate, review, all the good things. I know you all probably hate hearing this over and over again, but it is the easiest way to support the show, and I truly appreciate it. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into today's episode, which is going to be about the legends of the Panteón de Belen. The Panteón de Belen, also known as Santa Paula Cemetery, is located north of the Metropolitan Cathedral of Guadalajara in the heart of Mexico's third largest city. The name Cementerio de Santa Paula, or in English, the St. Paula Cemetery, comes from the fact that there is a chapel dedicated to the saint on the cemetery grounds. The cemetery was designed by the famous Mexican architect Manuel Gómez Ibarra, who, 30 years earlier, redesigned the spires of the Guadalajara Cathedral, which were destroyed in an earthquake. The Panteón de Belen, or Santa Paula Cemetery, was built to meet the need for more burial spots for victims of the epidemics, primarily cholera. Perhaps due to this tragic origin, the cemetery is shrouded in myths and tales of ghosts roaming the grounds. Local lore includes the legends of the pirate, the lovers, the monk, the nun, the vampire tree, the child afraid of the dark, and more. People have claimed to see these deceased residents haunting the graveyard over the years. The cemetery now offers night tours of the grounds, functioning as a sort of museum of the macabre. May 24th, 1882. A big storm was about to hit the city of Guadalajara. A young couple was putting their 10-year-old son to bed. His name was Ignacio Torres Altamirano, and his parents and grandparents lovingly called him Nachito. As Nachito was afraid of the dark, he always slept with 2 lit torches outside his bedroom window, and with the windows open. On the night the storm hit Guadalajara, the torches were blown out by its raging winds. That next morning, Nachito's mother entered his room and could immediately tell something was very wrong, as the room was uncharacteristically and extremely cold. She ran to her son's bedside to find Nachito motionless and as cold as the room itself. Later, it was determined that Nachito had died of a heart attack because of his intense, almost pathological fear of the dark. Rumors began to spread that the young boy's heart had exploded inside his chest, and Nachito's horrible death was the result of a curse or was the work of demons. Nachito was buried at the nearby cemetery, called by locals El Panteón de Belen, and the next morning, the boy's coffin was found disinterred and lying on the ground next to the hole that was his grave. His parents and the locals alike were alarmed, and the cemetery caretaker reburied the boy's coffin. However, the next morning, the same thing happened, and it happened again for the next 9 days. Nachito's parents concluded that because the boy was so afraid of the dark, he did not want to be kept in the ground away from the light. The solution? Make a stone coffin standing on 4 short pillars above the ground, so Nachito's tomb could always see sunlight. Since the time of Nachito's death, many people visiting the cemetery have claimed to have either seen or heard the young boy, or have seen mysterious balloons floating evenly a few meters over the cemetery as if being carried by a child. Nachito's grave draws the brave and curious from all parts of Mexico, some of whom leave him a toy and ask him for a favor in return. On Children's Day, which locally is celebrated on April 30th, and Christmas Day especially, the area surrounding Nachito's final resting place becomes covered in small toys and plush animals. The caretakers of the cemetery always donate the offerings to local children's hospitals. According to another popular tale, a swashbuckling man once sailed the Pacific during his youth and attacked many ships laden with the riches from around the world. As a middle-aged man, the pirate decided to settle and make a real life for himself in Guadalajara. He had only one son who did not know of his father's former life as a pirate. It seems that the man had stashed somewhere in the Guadalajara area a massive treasure of mostly gold and precious stones. A few months after hiding it, the man died and was buried in the Santa Paula cemetery. According to the legend, if a devout person visits the pirate's grave at midnight and prays the rosary for the man's tormented soul, the ghost of the pirate will reveal the exact location of the treasure. Over the years, many people have prayed for the pirate's soul in hopes of him revealing the treasure's location, but none have yet succeeded. Another Santa Paula legend is about a child who is connected to the former hospital next door. A young boy named Santiago was suffering from a terminal stomach ailment, and in some versions of the story, it is an aggressive type of cancer. During one of her visits, Santiago's mother brought the boy one of his favorite saint statues from home to help give her son comfort through his illness. While he was sleeping, the mother placed the small statue in the boy's hands, and when he awoke, he threw the statue against the wall, cursing God for giving him such a terrible disease. He yelled to anyone who would hear his wish that God himself would contract the horrible illness that he was suffering from. Santiago ended his rant by saying something like, "If God gets this disease, let's see who will cure him." That night, the boy's pain was more intense than ever, and he wandered outside the hospital and into the cemetery. The next morning, the boy's body was found hanging from a tree, with the hospital bed sheets used as a noose. Sometimes at night, people claim to see the boy hanging from a tree inside the Santa Paula cemetery. This story is often told by parents to their children, so they will not lose their faith in God. One of the most interesting stories connected with this cemetery is that of a vampire. In the mid-1800s, scores of small animals were found throughout Guadalajara dead and drained of their blood. After months of this eerie event, the same phenomenon started to happen to human infants. The alarmed citizenry then formed a vigilante group to hunt down the supposed vampire who was responsible for this. The mob rounded up a few suspects and singled out the palest and most, quote, vampiric-looking man of the group. As is customary according to the legendary rules in vampire lore, they drove a stake through the man's heart to kill him. The group then took the man's body to Santa Paula, placing it in an empty grave and covered by a stone slab. Locals rejoiced when the vampire attacks ceased, thus proving they had killed the right man. Time passed, and a tree started to grow over the slab covering the vampire's grave. It is said that if you break one of its branches, it will spurt blood, and even the leaves of the tree will leave a strange red residue in your hands if you handle them. The tree is now rather large, with a huge root system that grabs the slab like the tentacles of an octopus. It is said that when the tree's root system eventually breaks the slab, or causes a gap that opens the tomb, the vampire will escape and seek revenge on the modern citizens of a cosmopolitan Guadalajara. Finally, popular also is the story of Victoriana Hurtado, a woman who was born in 1833 and who suffered from catalepsy since she was a child. According to legend, she was buried alive by her own children, Octaviano, Alejandro, and Javier, who took advantage of the fact that their mother's illness at times made her suffer in a state of stiffness, unconsciousness, and diminution of pulse. However, despite their best nefarious efforts, they were unsuccessful in their mission to inherit the fortune of Victoriana. The wealthy woman had left every penny to charity. The truth came to light only after the cemetery's groundskeeper heard a terrible cry from the tomb of the woman the night after her burial. When he arrived, he saw the bloodied hand of Victoriana, who tried to escape the tomb. It was later determined that she died of a heart attack before she could. The cemetery is also recognized for its historic architecture and its many high-profile burials. Panteón de Belen used to be divided into two parts, one for the wealthy and one for the regular, quote, commoners. The latter was converted to a hospital after the cemetery's closing in 1896, but the section for the wealthy has remained intact. Santa Paula's largest building is the main mausoleum, which contains 900 resting places. The cemetery draws many thousands of tourists per year who not only come to view the architectural beauty or to enjoy the adjacent museum, but come for the nighttime ghost tours and are fascinated by its many legends. Welcome back. All right, so again, this one was all the time fun to put together, but it was fun to expand on the original episode that I did about this place. And again, thank you to everybody who wrote in or sent me videos or links or what have you about the different legends from this place. And I only told a few of them. This is the one website that I used to put this together. It was randomtimes.com, and they had all of these legends already kind of written in this nice package. And this is from, it says it was written 4 years ago. I wish there was an author's name. All I can see here is Random Collabs. You can check that out again on this website. I also used an entry from atlasobscura.com. I wanted to touch on a couple of things that were mentioned in these stories. So the first one, of course, that I want to talk about is the mention of cholera. You know, they said that this place was kind of built, or the cemetery was founded to accommodate for the bodies of the people who died from cholera. So I wanted to just kind of give a quick overview over what that may have looked like. And again, it also referenced in this entry itself that, you know, maybe that kind of led to all these spirits here. And we mention it almost every single episode. Like whenever there is some sort of like huge traumatic event or what have you, there's going to be this. Again, the way that I explain it is an impression of energy. I'm using a wiki entry about the history of cholera, and apparently there were or are 7 cholera pandemics that have occurred in the past 200 years. This says with the first pandemic originating in India in 1817, and that the 7th cholera pandemic is officially a current pandemic and has been ongoing since 1961. This is according to a fact sheet from the World Health Organization in March of 2022. So it's still happening. Again, pandemic doesn't mean it's as maybe widespread or as severe as COVID. It's just that it's over a certain amount of number that's concerning, so it's happening. But specifically in this time period that we're referencing of when this cemetery was founded was, I believe, the second and third pandemics. So the second one was from 1829 to 1837. There were many places that were affected, but again, we're talking about Panteón de Belen, which is in Mexico. The reference that it makes to Mexico in the second pandemic says that the epidemic of cholera, cause unknown and prognosis dire, had reached its peak. Cholera afflicted Mexico's populations in 1833 and 1850, prompting officials to quarantine some populations and fumigate buildings, particularly in major urban centers, but nonetheless, the epidemics were disastrous. During this pandemic, the scientific community varied in its belief about the cause of cholera. In France, doctors believed cholera was associated with the poverty of certain communities or poor environment. Russians believed the disease was contagious, although doctors did not understand how it spread. The United States believed that cholera was brought by recent immigrants, specifically the Irish, and epidemiologists understand they were carrying disease from British ports. Lastly, some British thought the disease might rise from divine intervention. The social importance of the government having a direct role in the development and application of science was demonstrated through the U.S. government's support of efforts to control the epidemic. So there's a lot of stuff in here that I don't know how much water it holds, There's these, I don't want to say accusations is the right word, but there are these hypotheses or these theories that, the U.S. believed it was brought over by immigrants, specifically the Irish, but also the Irish have not always been treated well or welcomed in many places. So this is maybe what they believed then. I don't know if that's actually the truth, and I'm not going to say that it is because, again, I don't know. Again, based on just kind of how certain cultures feel about other cultures, and we know that the United States loves to shit on other people for being different. So I'll just leave that there. I'll just kind of drop that seed there and leave it alone. But that was, again, the second, I guess, wave or the second pandemic of cholera, which was Mexico's first. The third official, the third worldwide pandemic of cholera, and the second one for Mexico was in 1846 to 1860, which is there's not a lot of time between. So they had kind of this little, sweet spot of almost 10 years between these two cholera outbreaks in Mexico. So again, this third one worldwide, second for Mexico, 1846 to 1860. Here, what it says is the third cholera pandemic deeply affected Russia with over 1 million deaths. Over 15,000 people died of cholera in Mecca in 1846, and a 2-year outbreak began in England and Wales in 1848 and claimed 52,000 lives. And then in regards to Mexico, this says, an outbreak in North America took the life of former U.S. President James K. Polk. Cholera, believed to spread again from Irish immigrant ships from England, spread throughout the Mississippi River system, killing over 4,500 in St. Louis and over 3,000 in New Orleans. Thousands died in New York, a major destination for Irish immigrants, and cholera claimed 200,000 victims in Mexico. That year, cholera was transmitted along the California, Mormon, and Oregon trails, as 6,000 to 12,000 are believed to have died on their way to the California Gold Rush, Utah, and Oregon in the cholera years of 1849 to 1855. It is believed more than 150,000 Americans died during the 2-year pandemics between 1832 and 1849. I know that was really history heavy, but I thought it was interesting to point out because, again, we've talked about how these major events and major traumatic events can leave these, again, impressions of energy and cause this ripple effect of people flocking to maybe spiritualism or mysticism or what have you. And so if this cemetery is a direct result of the cholera outbreak, then of course it's going to be tied to some of that trauma, right? The next one that I have right here it's a little bit more about cholera. I just wanted to know what it was because I just know it was a disease. I didn't know what it is or what it does. So I have just another wiki entry here. And again, all of these direct links are going to be in the Patreon Susto Google Docs. So this one says, I'm going to read just a little bit from it. It says, cholera is an infection of the small intestine by some strains of the bacterium Vibrio cholerae. Symptoms may range from none to mild to severe. The classic symptom is large amounts of, watery diarrhea that lasts a few days. Vomiting and muscle cramps may also occur. Diarrhea can be so severe that it leads within hours to severe dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. This may result in sunken eyes, cold skin, decreased skin elasticity, and wrinkling of the hands and feet. Dehydration can cause the skin to turn bluish. Symptoms start 2 hours to 5 days after exposure. Cholera is caused by a number of types of Vibrio cholerae, which some types producing more severe disease than others. It is spread mostly by unsafe water and unsafe food. So I don't think it has anything to do with, well, if you're in poverty, then that's why. Obviously, it's not because, people are living in poverty. It's the unsafe water and unsafe food conditions that have been contaminated with human feces containing the bacteria. Now, if there's something that we know about hygiene and OSHA and food safety and all of that in the 1800s, we know that the standards are not where they're at and they didn't have the resources that we have today. It reminds me of typhoid. They thought that about typhoid. They were like, oh, it only affects the poor people. It can't affect us because we're rich and we're wealthy. But it had nothing. It was just about your hygiene and sanitary habits. So that's where it seems like it stems from. This also says, uncooked shellfish is a common source. Humans are the only known host for the bacteria. Risk factors for the disease include poor sanitation, insufficient clean drinking water, and it's listing poverty, but poverty cannot cause illness. Maybe the symptoms or the side effects of poverty can cause it, but it's not just being poor makes you, it goes all the way to the top. It's a system. You already know how I feel about those kinds of conversations, but yeah. Anyway, I'm going to finish this off with cholera can be diagnosed by a stool test or a rapid dipstick test, although the dipstick test is less accurate. Obviously, prevention methods would be the opposite of the causes, which is clean water, clean food, clean sanitation, all that kind of stuff, which people living in poverty can have. People living in poverty can have good hygiene. They practice sanitation methods. I hate that that is listed as a risk factor. I'll move on to the next one. This next one is from psychcentral.com, and this is about nyctophobia. And nyctophobia is a phobia or fear of darkness. It's natural to have fears, but if they negatively impact your life, you may find treatment helpful. So this is the boy from that next story that allegedly had a heart attack because his night torches went out and he was, so afraid of the dark. Again, they said it was almost pathological, which fear of the darkness can be pathological. It is a real phobia. And this Psych Central entry, it's really short. It says nyctophobia is a specific phobia, and a specific phobia is an excessive, irrational fear of a particular object or situation that leads to anxiety, distress, and avoidance symptoms. In the case of nyctophobia, the thing causing the fear is darkness. According to research, an estimated 5 to 10% of people living in the United States have one or more specific phobias. Other common phobias include fear of heights, public speaking, and certain animals. When severe, nyctophobia can lead to significant issues in your personal and professional life. And there is a list of symptoms here that says that the symptoms of nyctophobia include difficulty breathing, fast heartbeat, right there you go, dizziness, nausea, fainting, avoidance, tenseness, and freezing. The fear of darkness may lead to significant distress or impair how you function in life. What causes nyctophobia? The phobia can stem from specific experiences or stick with you from childhood to your adult life. There's more on this, but it kind of just centers around that. I want to read this last part though. It says, finally, your fear of the dark may stem from a traumatic experience. Again, fear tied to traumatic experiences. For example, if you experience a traumatic event in a dark environment, it can be a trigger for post-traumatic stress disorder. The next link that I have is from paranormaljunkie.net. And this is about the vampire of Guadalajara. This is just a longer retelling of that story. And there's pictures of this tree everywhere, and especially on this one. I just wanted to mention it because it's really interesting, and there's a YouTube video tied to it. And I'll read the first and last parts of this entry. It says, there's a very creepy story about a vampire that wreaked havoc in Mexico in the late 19th century. This case all began when animals in Guadalajara were found dead all across the city. Then one night, they found a body of a woman in a dark alley. See, this is different from our story where it says that it was infants. And when the examiners examined the body, they were shocked because this woman had no blood in her body, and she also had a savage wound to her neck. A couple of days later, another body was found, and this body was dug up from a cemetery. It was a fresh corpse that had been just recently buried, and it also had wounds to the neck, and the cemetery wasn't that far away from where the first body was found just a couple days earlier. Then, the following week, several children, there we go, and another woman was murdered, and just like the others, they all had bite marks on their necks, and their bodies were all drained of blood. So then it goes on to tell that story about the vampire that we talked about, the vampire of Guadalajara. The last entry that I have here is about the legend of Victoriana Hurtado, and this is just a small entry. It starts off, like many other women from very powerful families, the happy Victoriana Hurtado was living a life of luxury. She never lacked for anything in her childhood, and her parents took it upon themselves to give her all the love that a girl could ask for. Over the years, she was engaged and later married to a principled man who was close to the family. Her father accepted the union, and her mother was happy with her marriage. Time passed, and the love of these young people gave birth to 3 children who they raised in peace. And then this says that things were not always rosy for her, that she had a strange disease, and then she had catalepsy. And this said that eventually her parents passed, and then that her husband passed, and it was tragic because they did have a happy marriage, but he did leave her all of his wealth. And this is where this version varies from the one that I found, is that this doesn't say anything about who the money was left to or how the children tried to inherit the money. It just said that they knowingly buried her alive. It ends with, legend has it that her children died shortly after they found out how the mother's body had been found. You know, her trying to claw her way out of the grave. Yeah, and those are all the links that I have for these. Welcome back, Ghoul friends. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed this one. Again, just kind of expanding on that previous episode about the Panteón de Belen, just its general spookiness and all of that. It was nice to, again, dive deeper into the specifics about it. As always, if you want me to share your story on Susto or on the socials, that's at Susto Podcast on every platform, you can do so by sending an email to sustopodcast@gmail.com. You can leave it in a DM on every social platform at Susto Podcast, or you can leave it in a rating or review. That's one of the easiest ways to help the show out. I truly appreciate it. And speaking of helping the show out, huge shout out to our current patrons: Liza, Sadie, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, Mario, Eva, Dee, Victoria, Josette, Sam, Angela and Co., Mandy, Julianne, Karen, Lori, Jeannie, Monica, Desiree, Anna C., Ashes, Neresa, Rachel, Azucena, Javier, Rios, Anna, Christine, Marlene, Diana, Chata, Jessica, and Lainey. Thank you all so much. I truly appreciate it from the dark, cold, decrepit depths in the chambers of my heart. I will talk to you all in the next one. Don't step on someone's grave. Bye.